So, one of Lady Bracknell's final recommendations here is for Jack to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over. And the impossibility of what she's asking for, I think, offers us a chance to compare it with the implausible impossibility of what is asked of Stanley Webber during the interrogation. And that implausibility is part of the absurd aesthetic of Pinter's play, but here it's part of the satirical undermining of the upper classes in Wilde. I think also that trying to acquire some relations of some kind before the season is over is not would function on some level as what Blanche is attempting to do throughout Streetcar by fabricating stories about her past and attempting to find a romantic partner. Jack understands quite rightly that this is an impossibility, and Lady Bracknell says, "I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell." In response, she says, "Me, sir, what is it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel." And so this misreading of significance, I think, is an important connection, I think, potentially with a frame in Desire Under the Elms, but also with Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar, and also Stanley Webber in The Birthday Party. You know, the misreading of the significance of some of those motifs in The Birthday Party, particularly eventually of sitting down and his willing, his sort of semi-willing participation in the birthday ritual, shows us this sort of that people in positions of power misread significance in all of these plays, but also the protagonists in weaker positions are often victimized on the basis of their misapprehension of significance. Now, Lady Bracknell sweeps out in majestic indignation. She's majestic in her aggressive opposition to what goes on here. And Jack says, "Good morning." And then Algernon from the other side of the room strikes up the wedding march. And Jack looks perfectly furious and goes to the door. He said, "For goodness sake, don't play that ghastly tune, Algie. How idiotic you are." And there's music here. I think it precipitates this crisis that's based on externality and the social fabric. You know, that this is based on an enormous sense of tension that's generated between Lady Bracknell's class prejudices and the codes and conventions of upper class Victorian life, that contrasts with the way that music's used in Streetcar to render the subjective quality of Blanche's internal crisis. You know, there's a real contrast of the source of crisis in the way that both of these playwrights handle music, and interestingly, even also compares to Pinter's use of the drum sounds in Birthday Party that in many ways unsettle that comfortable, repetitive, almost kind of dusty familiarity of normal, banal existence. And so again, are sort of external in their origin, but are uncertain from the audience perspective. You know, we wonder when we hear that drum sound, I think, whether it's subjective content in Stanley's mind, you know, that sense of menace being communicated as it is in Streetcar, or whether it's actually a naturalistic part of the surroundings. Algernon says, "Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolen has refused you? I know it is a way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it's most ill-natured of her." And there's an interesting contrast here with Blanche. You know, that Blanche is really never refusing people, but is making a performance of refusing people. And I think there's a contrast and a similarity between the two of them there. That the refusal of individuals is a performance and is a way of preserving an aestheticised ideal. And then Jack says, "Oh, Gwendolen is as tight as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a Gorgon. I don't really know what a Gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she's a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair." So his uncertainty here, I think, is an important thing, because you see this in his articulation, where he says, "I don't really know what one is like, but I'm quite sure that she is one." And I think he in this case, he's unconscious of his own power. He's unconscious of his own comparable class status. And I think that registers in his language and his uncertain inarticulacy. Algie then says, "My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only one thing that makes me put up with them all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die." And so I think this invocation of the family offers us an interesting contrast, or an interesting connection with Desire Under the Elms. A family is this enormous source of internal conflict and crisis, and is almost destined to compete with one another. But then also the Blanche and Stella relationship with Stanley, who are a tedious pack of people who've got the remotest knowledge of how to live. Their conflict in visions about reality and the way individuals ought to live is evident in that. And then also the bizarre sense of a family, of feigned family interaction in the birthday party that goes to show us how many of the actual authentic relationships that we trust are themselves nothing more than a kind of performative sham to overcome the sense of isolation that is the defining condition of subjectivity. So there's a really interesting crossover with all four plays, I think, in this particular issue. Algernon says, "All women become like their mothers, that is their tragedy. No man does, that's his." Jack says, "Is that clever? It's perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation of civilised life should be. I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody's clever nowadays." And so there's this sort of, in line with Wilde's aestheticism, there's this insistence on style over substance here, and that's ultimately what convinces Algernon of the value of his epigrammatic expression here, that men tragically aren't like their mothers, and Jack is uncertain about its value, and I think his uncertainty about the status of articulate language offers us an interesting comparison with the way that Stanley reacts to Goldberg and McCann, the way that initially he doesn't buy their persuasion simply on the grounds of it being articulate. There's a suspicion about the authenticity of language in both plays. Further down, Jack says, "What fools?" And Algernon says, "By the way, did you tell Brendan the truth about your being in Ernest in town and Jack in the country?" And there's a dramatic irony here about Algernon's explanation of fools. And there's a sense of his failure to understand his own role. He is one of these clever people that Jack kind of bemoans the presence of. Algernon is one of them. Then Jack responds to this question, "My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman." And so here, this question itself, which in the end is exposed as inaccurate, we find out that actually he is earnest in both places, but is not conscious of that and is willingly deceiving others, is articulated in this kind of paradoxical declaration about being honest to sweet young girls, that actually honesty is not important, and that we should actually be dishonest. And what we see then is that, again, that the unreliable nature of language that is particularly evident, I think, in the way that Goldberg interacts with Lulu, that cliched, inauthentic language that she exposes in him afterwards, is something that I think invites comparison with Jack's refusal of the truth to sweet, young, and refined girls. Algernon basically confirms this by saying the only way to behave is to make a woman to a woman. The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty and to someone else if she's plain. And again, that sense of inauthenticity that Jack, I think, is communicating. I think Algernon here, in his sort of callous sense of sexual objectification, is communicating something that they both seem to have a sense of conviction in. And I think that's what we see when Goldberg interacts with Lulu, is that this is really all that they're interested in. Jack then says, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. He's talking about getting rid of Ernest, killing him off. Or say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, quite suddenly, don't they? And this control of the self, this ability to manipulate his identity, in the end is what gives him the freedom to navigate a very limited and prescriptive set of social codes. For Blanche, this manipulation of identity doesn't work because material power is not on the side of the performative version of herself that she constructs. And so there's a real difference. There's a similar sort of impulse in both characters, but the conditions of power favour one over the other. Ernest's material power increases as he goes through the play until we get to the point where his fictionalised self becomes reality. Whereas Blanche's material power is already at the point of complete desolation and corrosion. And so therefore her kind of fictionalised, idealised self is attached to that corroding sense of material power. So then there is an interesting point to be made about both plays where self-fabrication is basically underwritten and enabled by material wealth in both cases. Now, Algernon comes up with a different story for him. Apoplexy is hereditary and he should have a severe chill then. And then Jack says, very well, my poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill, that gets rid of him. So there's sort of whimsicality of family and the killing off of this supposed brother and the callousness that would involve. I think it invites us to compare the way that Stella and Blanche's relationship is handled towards the end of Streetcar, where Blanche is sort of effectively killed off because she interferes with the social cohesion that Stella has dreamt up, basically, and well, not dreamt up, as lived out with Stanley. So that killing off of individuals if they threaten social cohesion that in both cases is registered through romantic relationships and marriage. And it shows us a similarity again between both texts. Jack says, "Oh, that's all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes long walks, pays no attention at all to her lessons." So this superficiality of judgment, again, invites us to compare the way that things are valued in this play with the way that Goldberg and McCann value what was considered to be orthodox. It's based on a kind of shambolic, a sham surface, a performative guise, rather than an authentic self. Now, Alden then says, "Have you told Gwendolen yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18? And Jack says, "Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolen are perfectly certain to be extremely brave claims. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister." And there's an element of foreshadowing here, because obviously in terms of the plot, they do end up becoming family relations by law. Further down, Jack is irritable. You know, it's nearly 7, Algernon says, and Jack irritably says, "Oh, it's always nearly 7. Well, I'm hungry. I never knew you when you weren't. We should go to dinner after you go to the theatre." "Oh, no, I learned listening." And so there's this repressed desire, I think, at the bottom of what's going on here with this hunger, this repressed desire that, again, I think offers us comparison with the drinking motif in Streetcar, but also the contained, the barely concealed, the physical compulsion that drives many of the characters in Streetcar, particularly Stanley and Stella, but also Blanche as well, and the way that the characters behave in Desire of the Animals. Algernon says, "We have a dialogue with Jack. Well, let's go to the club. Oh no, I hate talking. Well, we might trot around the Empire at 10. I can't bear looking at things which we do nothing. It's awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work when there is no definite object of any kind." There's a connection here, I think, with Sandy Weber's cultivation of nothingness as his alienation from society. Here, it's based on, a sort of reverse logic that doing nothing in some ways is more work because it's not entertainment, and that entertainment is ultimately what passes the time, and it's insistence that comes out of Wilde's aesthetic. And in the birthday party, that sense of alienation from society is based on a much deeper sense of personal inauthenticity. Gwendolen enters and Lane goes out, and then she speaks to Jack. "From the expression on my mamma's face, I should say, sorry, I fear we shall never shout. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mama, I lost at the age of 3, but although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you. So again, that sense of insincerity, supposedly she could marry many times and still be devoted to it. And that devotion is based on a name and a name only. So that this stubborn willingness to cling on to an aestheticised ideal again offers comparison with Blanche. She says, the Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me, and that kind of paradox here that because he is supposedly simple and honest and earnest, that he is somehow difficult to understand for characters that are involved in the play of surface and the whimsicality of the upper classes. And that I think is the opposite of Blanche, that his supposed deceptive simplicity. Blanche's attempts to be sort of deceptively complex in a way. She attempts to be sort of deceptively moralistic and deceptively intellectual, but in many ways is motivated by very simplistic desires, as many of the other characters in Streetcar. However, importantly, the phrase deceptive simplicity speaks to the nature of this play itself, because obviously this simplicity that Jack is being valued for is itself a deception. And so there's no real way to trust simple authenticity of character in this play as there isn't in the birthday party. The simple authenticity of character in the birthday party doesn't exist. Simpleness is based on a kind of inability to be articulate and an inability to be performative in any way that we see in someone like Meg. Meg is the only simple character, but she is equally incomprehensible because there is nothing to understand beneath the surface. Lane enters later, presents several letters on a salmon to Algernon. It's to be surmised that they're bills as Algernon, after looking at the envelopes, tears them up. And again, I think there's a sense of social power that Algernon gains from resisting communication with the outside world, but I think is an interesting contrast with Stanley Weber, who tries to do this, but obviously because of his inferior class position and wealth, can't live outside society in the way that someone like Algernon can. Algernon then speaks to Lane and says, "Tomorrow late I'm going Bunbury. Yes, sir, I shall probably not be back until Monday. You can put up all my dress clothes, my smoking jacket and all the Bunbury suits." And these costumes, I think, for his false identity, again, invite connection to Blanche's costumes that she keeps in the trunk. Finally, Algernon says, "I'm a little anxious about Bunbury, that is all," to Jack. "If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday." "I love scrapes, they're the only thing that are never serious." "Oh, that's nonsense, Al. You never talk anything but nonsense, and nobody ever does." And so here, the sense in which this performative identity will get him in trouble, obviously, invites us to connect this with Blanche and her performative self in the way it appears to be on the doomed course of history. But the nonsense that Algernon speaks, that kind of paradoxical nonsense that has some truth in it, but it's a truth that other people can't register. And that here it says scrapes are the only things that are never serious, that actually getting into some kind of position of conflict or a tangle of individuals is actually something to be enjoyed and relished from an aesthetic perspective, which is precisely what the play is about. That is precisely the opposite of what happens to Blanche. That being tangled in the fates of other characters is, in her case, what leads to her tragic downfall.